Twin Cobra, you are the pilot of the world's fastest attack helicopter. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
On the cover art for Twin Cobra, there is a helicopter with a shark design on it. And fans will remember in our Sky Shark episode, we also talked about this shark design on aircrafts. I know you guys don't remember what we said in that episode, but anything else to add here about, like, sharks on aircrafts? Like, they're supposed to be in the water.
It's like snakes on a plane, but it's sharks on a helicopter, which is ironic because this is called Twin Cobra, so there should be snakes.
Yeah, I guess I don't remember that talk about sharks on planes, but I agree with Joe on that one.
Just a cosmetic discussion, really, but now you're bringing up better points. We have really evolved as a podcast where we're starting to think logistically instead of just artistically.
Right. Also, I'm curious about what alternate universe this is in where battle helicopters, this is the fastest battle helicopter because it's a very slow helicopter.
Yeah, do we measure even, like, the speeds of helicopters against, like, what? Like, fastest helicopter in relation to, like, what? Slowest plane? Like, can a helicopter ever move as fast as a plane?
I don't think so. I think, like, a helicopter, it's just like, it's tilt-based. Tilt-based speed won't, like, ever compare to a jet engine.
Yeah, like, the idea is not to go, I feel like the selling point of the helicopter is being able to stop and go slow.
Yeah, so this is actually a bad helicopter.
The world's worst helicopter.
Yeah.
Well, there's a helicopter with an identity crisis. First off, it's a shark. It wants to be a cobra. And then second off, it wants to be a plane, not a helicopter.
Right. I'll say this. The helicopter turns and changes directions on a dime, and maybe that's what it means. Like, it's the fastest, like, maneuverability of a helicopter.
I appreciate you giving them the benefit of the doubt. It's also important to note that in our Twin Eagle episode, which this game only shares the shmup genre and one similar word with, on the Twin Eagle game, that only had one eagle on the box, and we really beat it up for that. It was supposed to have two eagles, but there was only one. But this game has no cobras on the box at all.
Does it even, because I didn't read the manual for this, but does it even reference cobras? Does it reference snakes or reptiles?
No references to reptiles whatsoever, but I'm sure, like, for those that are angry right now, I'm sure that, yes, we are all aware that, like, the Twin Cobra is the helicopter or whatever, but I think it's worth pointing out that you can't just name things twin animal and just make them a shmup and have it be a given.
Well, is it because the default... It sounds like I'm joking, but I'm not joking. Is it because the default weapon is like a twin barrel gun sort of thing?
I'm gonna say I doubt it, but you're the king of giving the benefit of the doubt, so let's do that.
King of doubt.
There is obviously helicopters that use the name Cobra. I don't know if they're twin Cobras. I don't know where the twin part comes from. So, Joe, I do appreciate your insight there. But the Bell AH-1 Super Cobra is a twin-engine attack helicopter. So maybe the twin...
there it is.
Right, the twin comes from the fact that it has two engines.
You hid this information from us, Mike. Like, what are you doing?
People come here for the speculation because obviously we're not a history podcast. We're not here to lay down the information of helicopters or Nintendo as they were. Instead, we're taking them at face value as they are right now.
True. Wild guesses is our bread and butter.
I also knew that about the twin engines, too. I was just part of it. I was in on it.
So I'm the only one that didn't know.
Well, Sean, did you know that Micronix is the developer of this game?
I didn't.
Well,
thank you.
Yep, you'll now know that as well. Micronix developed the NES port. they brought us other arcade shmups that got ported to the NES. So it's like a funny thing where like they don't make the arcade games that these are known for. Twin Cobra was first an arcade game. 1942, Tiger Heli, Thundercade, all arcade games, and then Micronix focused on the NES ports. Moreover, every port from Micronix that we've played, with the exception of Ghost and Goblins, has been considered a skip it on nostalgicast.com. So that's like not a great sign for a developer, right? That Micronix is basically 1 for 9 and the 1 isn't even essential.
I remember I kind of lumped them in with developers that I could kind of expect something from after the Ghosts game. But you're right. Like, if you actually look at the record, they don't have a good one.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot of, like, either, at the very best, unmemorable games.
Right. Like, for some reason, Micronix is a developer we talk about more often than not. We just apparently don't think of them very fondly when it gets to the end of the episode. That said, if you're just taking a quick look at the developer breakdown that's also on nostalgicast.com, it looks like right now, obviously Nintendo, Konami, Rare, Tosei, Capcom, Hudson Soft, the kind of people you expect, the ones we talk about often a lot, they are the ones that we have received mostly good games from, but then occasionally you just get like, Vic Takai, Taito, Technos Japan, like these guys have play-its and essential games on the list. They don't produce the kind of quantity that some of the other developers have. And so Micronix and Data East are both coming in at 9 games each, and yet only between the 18 games, just 1 play-it between the two of them.
Well, I mean, Data East, you gotta, like, that is the one that is famously bad, where I guess Micronix has just been obscurely mediocre.
True, but what does it say about these, the Micronix ability to take great arcade games and just not port them well? Should they just revoke their NES license, be like, you guys tried, like these are too far away from the success of the arcade game? Or they're probably just selling like hotcakes back then because they're just riding off the success of the arcade game. It's like, wow, now instead of paying 25 cents every time, I can just own it forever.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't remember the specifics on a lot of these other games, but does it seem like this worked in the arcade because it was designed for arcades and it just doesn't work on the NES? Or does it seem like Micronix is like actually making it worse in their porting of it?
It's a tough question, Joe. I would argue that we're still in that time where arcade technology is just, it's too far ahead of the NES. So obviously, like, at the end of the day, the gameplay is the gameplay, and it's not like Twin Cobra at the arcade is a completely different experience, but it does control smoother. Yeah. It does, it has much nicer graphics. I think that's what you're getting.
Now, are you saying that this is so what did you think of this game? Like, I had never played Twin Cobra on an arcade, so I don't have that comparison. Did you feel like because you had played the arcade game, this was lesser?
No, because still it is just it's a vertical helicopter shmup, and as crazy as that sounds, it's not even our first one on this podcast. So similar to the issue that we had a few weeks ago with Road Blasters, now we have an issue where with Twin Cobra, it's really like we have to try to figure out what's new. We can't just talk about how cool it is to be a helicopter shmup or how cool it is to be a shmup, because we've seen so many of those. So going by the laws of the shmups, we can really only evaluate it on the 3 merits that we evaluate all shmups, and that is the controls, the power-ups, and the enemies. If we're talking about the controls, this is an ugly game in my opinion. I do think that the graphic work is pretty mediocre for 1990s NES. I feel like in 1987 I would have given this a pass, but not now. It's an ugly game, and that oscillation while generating the areas as you're moving right to left, because it's not just you're not just locked to the screen. You can kind of scroll a little bit. that oscillation while generating the area, it just feels very strange. It had like a weird look to it on my on my playthrough, and I couldn't get over that idea because when you're playing the arcade one, obviously everything is so much nicer and the presentation is so much better that it actually helps the feel of the control of the helicopter. Whereas in the NES port, I felt like it was a little not stiff, right? Like you still get to move around and everything, but it just felt weird as everything was generating.
I wasn't like super bothered by the actual like movement or of the way the screen kind of like shifts side to side. And in fact, at one point, I welcomed this, but as I like looked back on my experience, I do feel like I was able to use the oscillation to sort of like cheese the game a little bit. You can just move away where like some battleship is just off screen and it just will stop shooting at you until you're past it because you can't see it. So like for me, my issue with it was more like a functionality issue rather than like before I noticed I could do that, I really wasn't even noticing that oscillation personally.
Yeah. First off, I would just like to add on to that take on shmups that because I don't even know how many we've played. I know that we've commented on playing a lot in the past, but now at this point, I feel like we're kind of like expert. Like if you go on to like CNET or a Wirecutter, like we're reviewing like AV equipment, and it's really just like there's nothing, like they're all trying to do the same thing, and it's like, does this one have all the bells and whistles? And that's sort of how we have to take on shmups now. But that being said, in terms of your criticisms, I also didn't really have a problem with the horizontal scrolling in addition to the standard like vertical always moving forward. And I did also notice that you could kind of cheese it by despawning things off screen, but I think that that's kind of countered by the fact that this is actually like closer to bullet hell than not as you keep progressing. So it really doesn't have that much of it doesn't make the game easy by a long shot.
Right, that's a great point, because you would expect with more space to have like more freedom of your movement and being able to dodge those bullets. But I would agree that you don't necessarily know as you're moving horizontally, you don't know what's on those opposite sides, and sometimes what you're getting away from could be worse on the opposite side, especially in later levels. It was nice to have more freedom of movement than we're used to, but I do think there's a reason that shmups mostly stick to this, like, what you see on screen is what you deal with.
Yeah. And when it comes to your criticism of like the feel, because I don't really think this is pretty tightly controlling. It's just the relative speed that sort of makes it feel more sticky. Like you have all this space, and when you get to the edge of a screen, you still have more space to go because it's gonna scroll with you for a bit. So it makes you feel a bit more sluggish, even though like 1-to-1, the input is like it's just as sharp as we're used to in these shmups. So I think that might have something to do with it.
On the enemies front, because now you are dealing with a larger screen and that you have the option to avoid enemies, like you guys both mentioned, I would also say that the projectiles, a little more spaced out, but also maybe a little more forgiving. I feel like I'm used to a bigger hitbox on these projectiles, and maybe it's just the shape of the projectile or whatever, but I felt like sometimes in other games, like 1942, it's less forgiving, whereas this one, like, the projectile needs to actually be on the same, like, sprite tile as the helicopter for it to contact a collision. Otherwise, you still kind of free it, and I found that nice for my own survivability in this game, because otherwise, let's say if it was a game where the projectiles are near you, this is a game where you will see, 12, 15 red balls at a time if enough enemies are on screen. There's not really like a sprite limit there, So to have at least a little bit of freedom in that hitbox was a small, nice touch.
Yeah, I noticed that too, and I'll say I think that this game is definitely hard, especially for me, not a shmup guy. I'm not good at it, but I did feel that I had like a little more like ability to survive and get through some of these really dense parts than I feel like in a lot of shmups where like I get overwhelmed. So, I was like, it was almost like I was superficially impressed with myself because I'm like, oh my god, look how crazy this screen looks. But I do think that there's like maybe the projectiles are a little slower than a lot of other games, but I definitely noticed times where I'm like, okay, that sprite did literally make contact with me, but I guess like my hitbox is just like my center of gravity or something.
Yeah, I think it's
like,
just the cab. Like if it can hit under where your like rotors
even
are.
like the nose, it can go past.
I think it's just that center where like the rotor is actually spinning in the middle.
So there were a few times where I died because I thought I had died and I stopped and I was like, oh shit, I was alive, but then I died because so then I just learned to just keep going, and there were a lot of times where I was like, wow, I'm done for, and I got through it. And it made me feel like I was like super skilled, but I think really more it is that the game is forgiving. I mean, trust me though, if you're not like, you still die a lot in this game, but there were just a lot of those moments where I thought I was going to and I didn't.
When you die, you restart right where you died. Do we agree that this is better than starting back at the beginning of the area, or are you losing a chance to build, your power-ups up to this area again?
I think in a game like this, it's totally fine, and I think it's a frustration reliever. I know that you need to sort of cultivate the power-ups again, but I wouldn't want to just go back and do it all over again.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's kind of a couple of like levels of that, like what happens when you die. I mean, first of all, yeah, when you get hit and you explode, your helicopter just reappears on screen. But then if you lose like all 3 or 4 of your lives or whatever, then it's like quote unquote game over and you have a continue. And then you start back at the beginning of the stage, right? And then if you lose all your continues, then you start back at the beginning of the game. So it's like, I think they got it right at some element and they balanced it like decently, but then like, I'm never a fan of like, okay, but you only have so many of those and then you just start the whole game over. I get that's an arcade thing.
No, yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say, is that it continues feel like a monetization thing. And in the game that you paid for, you probably could lose the continues thing, but still have the lives system, like unlimited continues, but you still only have X amount of lives.
Yeah, I don't think I don't fault a game like this for it anymore. Like it's just the nature of the genre, because otherwise you could just brute force through the game and you wouldn't have really learned anything.
That's a good point, Sean. That like shmups in general are relatively short. It's just the skill level involved to like, we've never seen a shmup that's like 50 levels of increasing difficulty. No, I know, it's true. But like most shmups really are just 5 to 7 levels that you just have to, and the skill level really, that ceiling gets hit fast for most players and they never experience those later levels, which is a problem in itself. But if you did have unlimited continues or unlimited incentive not to just keep dying and keep pushing forward, there's not really like a story or a reward for experiencing the later stuff. It really is the excitement that you did survive to that point, right? So for the player, the achievement is how far you got, not necessarily beating the game.
And I get that element of like seeing, okay, we're gonna boot it up again, see how far it can get booted up again. I mean, I had that same kind of experience with To the Earth, which obviously is not a shmup, but like where I was just like, I'm just gonna see how far I can get this time, see how far I can get this time. But I think I would agree more that like about you brute forcing it because you have like unlimited continues if this game didn't give you 3 lives and then you start the level over. So it's like, yeah, unlimited continues to start that level, but you have to beat that level from beginning to end in order to move on. And I think that's the case in a lot of games now, where it's like, yeah, you don't have to start the whole game over, but we're not going to just put you back at the end of this level. you've got to start the level over. Like, I think that is a good balance where it's like, yeah, you don't just get to keep going exactly from where you left off. If you die too much, you're going to start this level over and try and do the whole level again. Starting the whole game over, I totally get the side of it where it's like, oh, I just want to see how far I can get. But for me, starting the whole game over is too much.
The manual lists out all of the enemy resistant values. That's their words, not mine. Just think of that like HP, which is kind of funny. I mean, in RPGs, that's like a skill that you have to like either have the correct party member, or you have to learn that, or you have to toggle it with something. Like the HP value on an RPG enemy is something that is very useful information. I don't think anybody's out here calculating, like, the resistance value of the regular attack enemy helicopters versus the larger planes or the turrets or something like that. But the manual goes through the trouble of giving them all resistance values. So I feel like, just to go back to the RPGs thing, that's something that if you really, in certain games, you need to actually just buy the strategy guide to find out their resistant values, right? Like, they didn't give that information out for free.
Well, I mean, this is a lot more explicit and giving you like a numerical value, but I don't think it's out of the ordinary to, like, for a manual to say, like, this is a high armor enemy, or like, this guy's got a lot of health. Like, it's just giving you a more, explicit description.
Yeah, are these values like on a scale of 1 to 10, or is it like, oh, he has 328 HP, and you're like, okay, I don't know what that means.
No, well, it doesn't. It's not 1 to 10. I know that, but it's and I'll pull up the manual if it helps. But it is telling you like what your damage does, and then what its resistance value is. So theoretically, like, you could calculate it out.
Right. You can just play this game on pen and paper with a calculator.
Right. Use the game FAQs, like description of where the enemies are. Draw it all out on graph paper.
Make it turn-based.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the way the resistance value works is that it's working off of like your base value of, let's say, if you have no power-ups at all, right? No superchargers or no upgraded missiles, then the small chopper is a resistance value of 1. So 1 hit, 1 kill. But if you have the like combat barge, then it's 28. And it's like, do people time out? Like, okay, 28 shots. Like, here we go. Like, I don't think that helps in a shmup.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, I guess it's really just like, here's where your power-up should be, because this game, more than the ones I can recall, which aren't many, but your power-ups like scale pretty aggressively. You can end up shooting like 20 projectiles with one button press with some of these. My favorite being that missile one that, like, halfway up the screen it sort of speeds up. So while each individual projectile may only do 1 damage or HP, whatever you want to call it, when you're throwing barrages at these guys, like, it almost doesn't matter how many hits it takes.
Yeah, I didn't really think of that. I was thinking a minute ago, like, the one way it could be useful is if you're stuck on like a boss. Every time you get there, you keep dying, like some big ship or something, and you're like, okay, at least I know what I have to do. But yeah, I forgot that these power-ups are like, it's just a mess of bullets on the screen, so it's not, you're counting those.
Yeah, and the bosses have crazy resistance values, at least for this game, like 64, 104, 136, so they definitely scale. To get back to what Sean was saying about the power-ups, yeah, it's interesting because there's like 2 different things of collecting for power-ups. There's the supercharger, or the bomb, or the 1-up, or the P-stars. Those are like one form of thing that you collect. And so, for instance, the supercharger, this lets you increase the Cobra's like firing rate. And there are 6 levels of firing power, so you can keep collecting superchargers to keep shooting your projectiles faster. But that's regardless of whether you have an actual power-up or not. If you just have the base thing, like, yeah, that shoots out faster. But there's these, they call them saucers, that if you hit an enemy, a bullseye, it was really what it looks like, will float around the screen. And I actually thought it was one of those power-ups that worked a little bit like some other shmups we saw, where if you shoot at it, it changes, but it's just time-based. You can shoot at it, it doesn't actually change. I'm not sure quite why I thought that, but it switches between red, blue, green, brown. So if you don't like the power-up you're seeing, you can just kind of wait it out. I'm not assuming it won't disappear off screen, and just collect the next one. And those power-ups, yeah, like they're offering different sprays, right, or different types. So like the red saucer is missiles, and the blue saucer is like a radial spray. But cosmetically, like, we've seen shmups handle this a lot better, and so I'm not arguing that these are like bad power-ups or whatever, but they really are just taking the projectile that you were already seeing, probably with a great supercharger rate too, because you get those pretty often, and now they're just shooting in different directions, so it doesn't quite feel as powerful as other shmups, even if it is just as powerful.
They all have like different graphics associated with them. It's not. Some of them are just shapes, but they're like different colors. Some of them have more detail, like that missile one. But yeah, that like purple circle thing is just like a nondescript purple circle. But I think like the combination of like the fire pattern, because they all have they could do that radial thing. The missiles sort of go out into like an arrow. I forget which color. I think it's the green is just a very penetrating column of fire, with each button press sending out like 8 or 9 of these things. I think they all have their own different feel. Like, yeah, they don't have like a high, I guess, like sprite count, but I wouldn't say that they don't feel powerful.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was getting powered up, mostly with the missiles on like that kind of widespread shotgun type fire rate, I would definitely feel a huge difference in my power level, where like suddenly I'm like, oh, I'm keeping this whole screen at bay, like nothing's really even getting near me, because I'm just kind of using that to kind of keep everyone away from me. So I noticed the difference when I would get killed and have no power up, but really, maybe it's just the way that I played the game, but I didn't get the other power-ups that often. I really mostly just got the like missiles that spread out in that like arrow formation, which was fine with me.
Yeah, it was the one I preferred, yeah.
It is one of those games where if you collect any other kind of power-up, you lose the power-up that you had. So I don't know if this is what you were saying, but if you only ever like collected the missiles, maybe that was the one you preferred or whatever, because you don't want to like, once you catch the one that you want, you don't want to collect any more. It's not like the superchargers where they keep getting stronger.
I think it keeps like the strength, like the relative strength between pickups though. Like,
yeah, no, that it does, but it just changes. Like, so for instance, if you really liked the missiles, right? Like you wouldn't want to switch that off, especially if you knew that a certain enemy was coming up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree with what you were saying, Sean, about like feeling powerful, and I did use the wrong words there. I think I just meant like presentationally and conceptually. Other shmups have handled power-ups in like a way that, because power-ups are like the cell of shmups, right? A shmup without power-ups is weird, and it's not weird that this one, like they handled the way that they make you feel stronger is great. But I don't know, we've had shmups where like one of the power-ups just is a bolt of lightning that strikes down and kills all the enemies on screen, and like that is presentationally cool. Or you have like Life Force, which adds additional versions of you, like little versions that also shoot, and then you feel powerful that way. Like, this is just, yes, it is achieving the satisfaction of killing a lot of enemies on screen and everything, and it's a helicopter, so I'm not asking it to do anything that like an alien spaceship would do. It just felt like it was more bullets being fired, and not necessarily anything cool.
No, absolutely. And I feel like we've started 3 or 4 shmup reviews with like, oh, this is like, for the hardcore, and it's like there's no frills. It's just really solid shmup gameplay, and it's like, if that many of them have this little personality, then why are there that many of them? And I agree. Like, this doesn't take a lot of creative license. It doesn't do a lot with style. It's very utilitarian, and I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, like, it gets the basics right, but how much of an achievement is that?
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm definitely one to have like hardcore said that plenty of times about other shmup games, and I was feeling that about this game too. And I remember thinking this time like that just means at this point that it's gonna be completely forgettable because so many shmup games are just like, oh yeah, they're functioning shmups. Like I feel like that's because I'm not a big fan of shmups. I feel like that's what I end up reviewing. I'm like, yeah, this works. It's a shmup. It works as a shmup. But I will say that one thing I think that they did do with the power ups that I don't remember really seeing in other games is that the way that you pick up the power up, it sort of like makes it a challenge to pick up the power up. Like the thing like zips around the screen, and it's a kind of simple little animation, but it really did make me kind of balance this risk reward and put myself into danger because I was playing pretty conservatively, staying towards the back and like really watching every projectile coming at me. And then suddenly this power up's on screen and it's like taunting you and it's moving around really fast. And I know how much more powerful I am with the power-ups, so it makes me kind of go, like, throw caution to the winds into danger to try and get it, and sometimes it gets me killed, and other times it pays off, but I kind of actually think that was a decent, like, I don't know if that was the reason they did that, but if it was, that was a good decision.
I'd say it's pretty intentional, because, like, it in a lot of games, it'll sort of stay in its place in reference to, like, the background, and if you end up passing by it will be passed by over time, whereas these power-ups will sort of do like a square pattern in the center of the screen, no matter, like, in no regard to how you're actually moving. So I'd say that whole challenge thing is very much by design.
Former Essential game, Stinger, had a system that was really interesting for the power-ups, where you had to shoot them to increase the power-up, right? Like, you had to continue to shoot at it while dealing with the enemies on screen, but it also bobbled it back up. So this way, if you were shooting at it, it kept staying on the screen, but if you were suddenly tasked with dealing with the enemies, you might miss it. That felt like kind of what was going on here too, with this power-up of not just coming directly towards you or staying in place, is something that you have to chase after, or you might chase after it and as a result not notice that a bullet was also coming in your direction. For a lot of these shmups that aren't just essential games where they control so tightly that we have to give it to them, it really does come down to the theme, right? For instance, 1942 and 1943 are games for people who want to play in like a World War II style shmup, or Gun.Smoke is like it's a Western shmup, or even crazy people might want to play The Adventures of Dino Riki, and that's a caveman shmup, right? Like, there has to be a fun theme for it. How fun is this, like, the idea that you're a helicopter? Like, forget that it's just, otherwise it's just kind of a generic setting with no real world enemy, or even like, a name for an organization. I know you're given that you're part of like the Sammy Assault Force, which is fun because American Sammy were the publishers of the game, so they kind of inserted themselves in there. But otherwise, the hook of this game, right, isn't that you're fighting in the Pacific, or that you're taking down these giant carriers. It's that you're a helicopter. But how much fun is that?
I mean, it's just it doesn't tie in to the gameplay at all. Like, this controls like any other shmup, but a little slower, and maybe you could say that is supposed to reflect the handling of a helicopter, but I don't buy that. Yeah, I mean, it's just modern, nondescript military shooter, which, I'm used to from my childhood. I mean, I guess because this is 1990, it could still be like, we're not going to tell you, but it's the USSR. Like, it's always the USSR. But it's not. Maybe it is, but there's no personality to it. The whole thing is that you are a helicopter. It's really just leaning on its core gameplay, and I'd say it's good. It's good gameplay, but in terms of personality, this game has none.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much more to add to that. It does feel just generic. It does. It's so many other games that take this like military style. Some of them do them really well, and it's like, oh, this is cool. And some of them are just like this. It's just like it's just a backdrop for our game. Like we have a game where a group of pixels shoots other pixels, and we wanted to make it look like something you've seen in real life.
On the sequels and spin-off side, a sequel, Twin Cobra 2, was originally under development by Toplin, but the studio closed down in 1994, and then Taito allowed Toplin offshoot Takumi Corporation to complete it. So arcades and eventually a Sega Saturn port came for Twin Cobra 2, and then a Plus version, Twin Cobra 2 Plus, was released on Sega Saturn in Japan only. Twin Cobra 2, as far as I looked, basically, even if forget anything they might have added, I think it still has the problem that Sean and Joe both just discussed with, like, if the hook is that you're a helicopter, like, the game still isn't quite achieving that part of it's not signing off to its end of the bargain. And then Twin Cobra and Tiger Heli, which was another game that we reviewed on the NES, those can both be played on a very expensive Japanese Switch cart known as Toplin Arcade Garage Tiger Heli. And I'm wondering why Tiger Heli is in the name, but not Twin Cobra. Did Tiger Heli sell gangbusters?
I mean, I guess that must be the more popular game. But this is a game that was released on Switch?
Yeah, the Switch thing, it's like every day, Nintendo has no quality control when it comes to releasing stuff on Switch anymore. So basically, it looks like Toplin or Taito, Toplin's not around anymore. So Taito just smelled money and was like, yeah, we can put these old emulated games on a Switch cartridge and people will buy it. And then when it goes out of print, collectors will buy it.
Ah, there it is.
Yep.
Well, that they don't get that collector money.
No.
Unless they're the ones buying the carts.
Wow, it's a conspiracy.
I think that might be it.
Who do you think is selling all those copies of Super Mario 3D All-Stars? It's Nintendo. Whoa. They're the ones selling them on eBay.
I was going to say some of it is us. Remember?
Well, most of it, yes. Yeah. But the rest are Nintendo.
We bought all the games.
Right. The other thing that is us, and it's been us for 268 episodes, 269 maybe. I don't know where we are.
Doesn't matter.
Well, I actually do know where we are. We're in the part of the show where we do the essential games list.
You didn't need a second segue for that. You were already in the middle of a segue.
And I almost started the show again. Did you see that?
And
I'm not sure where I'm going with this. For my vote for Twin Cobra, what else I can say here? Really, I guess I could just turn it into a funny vote and say that I'm really disappointed that they couldn't be bothered to put two Cobras anywhere on the box. Because I'm sure in one of these levels, you play on somewhere where potentially there could have been Cobras on the ground, right? Like, obviously you wouldn't be fighting any Cobras. You're kind of a Cobra. Just give me some respect and put two Cobras on the box. Two Cobras on the box, and I might have considered it for the Essential Games list. But as it stands right now, I just can't do it. Sean?
Now, if all they did was in the manual have like some art of what the pilot is supposed to look like, I mean, I imagine it's just like maybe it's just a self-insert, and it won't give art for that. But if it was like this guy with like spiked up hair and sunglasses and rolled up sleeves, and he had like two Cobras as tattoos, like that'd be pretty cool. But also that might be the case because I didn't read the manual. But I did play the game, and again, I do think it's solid. Like it is a solid, budget pick to like round out your house with this purchase. It's got all the features you're looking for, aside from eARC 4K HDR equivalencies. But if you're looking for an AV system, if you're looking for a shmup that'll just like do the job of a shmup, this is the game for you, but it's not essential.
And I would just like to add that we can kind of see keep in mind, it's Twin Cobra, so two people are piloting it. We can kind of see them, We can't see any tattoos because they're wearing their bomber jackets. But remember that it's like a shark on the helicopter, which is never seen in the game. They could have at least shown like some cool eyes or the mouth or something somehow in the game, but you don't even get to see that part.
Well,
So-
sharks are sometimes called the cobras of the sea, so
That's
that might
true.
be it.
Joe, you're clearing your throat. So
I'm clearing my throat.
What is your
I'm
vote?
anticipating? That's my vote. I am actually going to say probably the exact thing that Sean mentioned earlier that we say about a lot of shmups, which is that, yeah, the shmup functions fine, it works, it does its job as just being a basic shmup, and if you're a fan of like core shmup gameplay, this probably won't let you down. But I guess I'll amend. I'll take what Sean said in his essential game, but I'll amend it for mine to say that if you are a fan of just pure shmups, this is a game for you. I wouldn't even say it's the game for you because it's just there's a dozen others that can scratch the same itch. So in that sense, not essential, but not bad.
But also not good.
Also not good.
I would like to add that since Sean mentioned that he didn't read the manual, he failed the essential safety precautions laid out by the American Sammy Corporation, where
Did he vote those safety precautions onto the essential list?
we haven't yet, but they have them listed out. And they said, please take the
nerd.
time to read the important instructions in this booklet. Observing the step-by-step instructions and complying with warnings will be your personal guarantee to greater game satisfaction over a long period of time. And so maybe your game satisfaction would have been higher had you have read the manual, Sean.
Well, what were the steps?
Well, the steps are weird because, like, so you would think that the steps are then going to be, like, how to play the game and, like, things, like hints and tips and tricks and stuff. But the
Don't
steps...
sit on it.
Yeah, the steps are, like, avoid subjecting this high-precision game pack to extreme temperatures. Or avoid touching the connectors. Store the game pack in its protective storage case.
Wow, this is pretty, this is unique. I haven't seen this anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say that over time, like over long periods of time of me not putting any of my games in the oven, I've really enjoyed my time playing those games. So, like, it does pay off if you're just patient.
Well, you gotta get a little bit of a sear on the edges, otherwise you're not really
I'm
playing
telling
the
you, I
game.
know it sounds crazy, but just try. Just try not doing it.
And here comes another crazy one. Pause for 10 to 15 minutes after 2 hours or more of continuous game playing. Now, that is something that you would see later on in, like, the Nintendo Wii, where, like, Nintendo would say, like, hey, you should take a break, right? Like, they put those in their games. It's just crazy to think about, right? They're actually telling people, like, hey, stop playing our games. Take your time. Like, don't buy another one of our games after you complete this one because it's going to take you so long to complete it.
Yeah.
But that's
but
not what they're saying here. They're saying take the break because it will extend the life of your cartridge. Now, I don't think that's true.
I could have swore that it was just so that, like, really weird parents wouldn't sue them for having to buy their kids glasses after 5 to 6 years. But, I mean, I guess I buy it. I mean, if you don't use something for a while, it stays the same.
It's funny because, like, most of these cartridges, I assume, still work today. So, like,
it must not have been played.
Well, I'm just saying you're extending the life, like 15 minutes worth of break. Like, it's just like probably a negligible amount, but technically, I'm sure it does extend the life. Like, instead of lasting until April of 2090, it'll last until June of 2090 or something.
Please note that this game has been programmed to take advantage of the full screen. Some older models have rounded screens and may block out a portion of the image, which is really funny because in just 15 years, really, from the release of this game, no longer were they able to take advantage of the full screen that they promise.
Not a future-proof.
I'm really glad that we took the time to talk about these things because there's nothing I hate more than a 40-minute episode. Like, I prefer like 45, hell, even 50-minute episodes. Do we think we can get there?
I don't think we can get to 50. I've been looking at the analytics, and other than the fact that most of our listeners are from Australia, the biggest thing that I can tell is that they kind of wane off at the 46-12 mark.
4612. All right.
Right.
We can get there.
I think we can get there. So if we just kind of say you want to plug anything, the Patreon, the website.
We can count it down. We're coming up. If we count it
Oh,
down.
okay.
No. I don't count it down. That's silly. I do
Oh,
have
okay,
one
fine. Yeah,
thing
you do
that I
your
want
thing
to
then.
pitch, and it's actually something that I created.
Oh, time's up.